So, good morning, friends. Once again, I welcome you back to this class of video lecture. This is BA Part 1 English Literature, and we have been taking paper 1, that is Poetry and Drama. And today we take up a very famous poem written by Henry Vaughan, and the title of the poem is The Retreat. The literal meaning of the title is to go back to an older state, to an older stage, and that older stage uh, is regretted much on the part of the poet. And what is that older stage of life? This is the loss of innocence of childhood days. The moment we become old, mature, educated, cultured, and civilized, day by day we become all these things. We become mature, we become educated. But on the other hand, we miss the innocence of the childhood. We miss the simplicity. We miss that purity of mind and heart. The upright heart, the pure and upright heart is no more pure and upright when we become old, when we go grey. When we go grey haired, all these things of childhood days diminish to a great extent. So, this poem is about the loss of innocence of childhood days. This poem is about the loss of the simplicity and sensitivity and sensibility. Friends, childhood is deeply associated with these three things: simplicity, sensitivity, and sensibility. And simplicity, sensibility, and sensitivity make life pure and upright. Whatever exists in life is nothing but the simplicity, but the sensibility for other human beings. The moment we lose this sensibility, then we become wicked, crooked, and savage. The entire problem in human civilization has been the loss of sensibility. When we think of only ourselves, when we stop thinking about others, when we do not embarrass other people, when this embarrassment is missing, the problems arises. That's why the poet in the very beginning of the poem says, happy those early days when I shined in my angel infancy. The, so this is the most best known poems written ever by Vaughan. This is the only poem of the poet included in Palgrave's Golden Treasury. Yes, that's a very famous anthology, friends. Anthology, the collection of the poems. And we have one famous anthology written by Palgrave. So Vaughan was a deeply religious poet. In this poem, he regrets the loss of the innocence of childhood, when life was lived in close communion with God. Yes, child is that figure who lives in close communion with God. Otherwise, when we become mature, we get cut from all these things, from the divine pursuit. Accordingly, unlike most men who long to go forward, he longs to retreat to the blessed life he knew before birth. Yes, he talks of life before birth. You see, he is a religious poet. He believes in the pre existence of life, he believes in the post existence of life, life before birth, life after death. So it is commonly regarded that Vaughan's poem inspired Wordsworth's Ode on Intimations of Immortality. Yes, that's a very famous poem prescribed in MA previous of MDS University. Ode on Intimations of Immortality, nearly 2 centuries later. So the poet says in the beginning of the poem, happy those early days when I shined in my angel infancy, before I understood this place appointed for my second race. So uh, the poet says that he was very delighted, he was very happy in his life when he was in heaven, when he came to the earth. Before coming to the earth, he was very happy. When he was an infant, he was sinless. He was beyond all sins. You see, sin brings out doom. Sin brings out fall to man. So, and the earth is full of sin. The creatures living over here are full of sin. And according to Bible, all human beings are sinners. As the story goes on in the Paradise Lost, that all human beings are sinners since we are the descendants of Adam and Eve. Adam, the first of man, Eve, the first of woman. So he remembered his life, his life which was happy. But it was that life when he was in close communion with God. It was the life before the birth. You see, many people, many writers, many poets from Occident, from the Western civilization, have their own mythological basis, and they believe in such things which are commonly believed in Indian culture and civilization. Right? The incarnation, the salvation, these things. He had not yet understood the wage of this world where he is destined to live a second life. Yes, he considers life after birth to be the second life, and the poet says that I have not understood the adequate ways how to live this second life. The first being the life before birth in heaven, and the second after birth. So the two lives have been contrasted here in this poem. So the first part of his life was quite happy, delighted, pleasurable, when shined in my angel infancy. He considers himself to be an angel. He had all infancy, he had all purity. You see, this purity is important. Purity of thought, purity of mind. The moment we become smart, logical, rational, we lose all such purity. And we think in terms of loss and gains. We do not think in terms of happiness, delight, but we think in terms of loss and gains. When this calculation continues, the life of simplicity comes to an end. So he had only the thoughts of heaven and the happy life were there in his very early days. At this time, he always felt that he was not far from his original home heaven. Yes, in that stage, he thinks that he is not away from God, from his Creator. He says he was hardly a mile or two ways from heaven. He was much close to heaven, to God, to his Creator. He could look back to his life in heaven and see God's bright face and the heaven's brightness whenever he saw golden flowers shining in the bright sun or some golden cloud shining like gold because of the sunlight. This is the next part. And I read the first part. Appointed for my second race, or taught my soul to fancy aught but a wild celestial thought, when yet I hadn't walked above a mile or two from my first love, and looking back at that short space, could see a glimpse of his bright face, when on some gilded cloud or flower my gazing soul would dwell an hour. Yes. So he says that this was the time he could see golden flowers shining in the bright sun, or some golden cloud shining like gold because of sunlight. The poet says that when he was a child, he was innocent and pure. This purity, this innocence, before I taught my tongue to wound my conscience with a sinful sound, or had the black art to dispense a several sin to every sense, but felt through all this fleshly dress, bright shoot of everlastingness. The poet says that when he was a child, he was innocent and pure. He was very much innocent. He never said a word to wound the feelings of others. What we do here, we hurt others knowingly and unknowingly, because we calculate the things. We see the things from only from our perspective, only from our paradigm. We do not see the perspectives of others, because we lose the sensitivity. We don't have that empathy. So he never uttered words which contained trace of sin. At that time, he hadn't acquired the habits of this earth. This is that life before birth. It was a time before he had acquired enough wickedness to sin through every one of his senses. Childhood was a time of innocence and purity. At that time, he realized that underneath the body of flesh, there was a soul with some consciousness of its immortality. Yes, it was, this is Gyan, this is Jnana, knowledge, that under the coverage of flesh, there remains a spirit which is immortal, and the spirit or the soul, whatever you call, never dies, and that spirit always remains pure and innocent. So when you go by the spirit, when you do not go by the flesh, you become pure. So time and again the poet underscores the significance of purity. That's why the poet says, but felt through, it was in that life before birth. You see, you underline this thing, that he talks of that life which is there before birth, but failed, and in that life he could understand, he could know, but felt through all these fleshly rays, bright shoots of everlastingness, that he could know that under the coverage body, beyond the body, there is a soul, there is a spirit which is immortal. Thank you, friends.